Welcome to history class. Today I am going to teach you history of a standard 8, chapter 6, weavers, iron smelters and factory owners. In the previous chapter we had to discuss about the coming of cotton mills. Then today we have to discuss how the cotton mills came into India. You also take a test. Cotton mills. There is a first cotton mill in India was set up in Bombay in 1854. From the early 19th century, Bombay had grown as an important port for export of raw cotton from India and England and China. Then as a result of this, first cotton mill came into India in 1854, and because Bombay was an important port at that time, so it is easy to carry raw material from India to England and China. That's why it came in Bombay, now it is called as Mumbai. It was close to the vast black soil tract of western India where cotton has grown, and when cotton textile mill came up, they could get supplies of raw materials with ease. Then black soil we can found in the western part of India, that's why cotton grow here, and because soil is very suitable, and so raw material was easily supplied. That's why this area is suitable for coming the cotton mill. Here is a picture. Workers in cotton factory in 1900. Most workers in the spinning departments were women, while workers in the weaving departments were mostly by men. Here you can see most workers were women. Okay. In 1900, 84 mills started operating in Bombay. Most of these were established by Parsi and Gujarati businessmen, and who had made their money through trade with China. Mills came up in other cities also. The first mill in Ahmedabad was started in 1861, and the first production in India therefore was during the First World War, when textile imports from Britain declined and the Indian factories came called upon to produce cloth for military purpose. അപ്പം ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ ഡിപ്പെൻഡ് ചെയ്തത് ബ്രിട്ടനെ ആയിരുന്നു. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞാണ് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ കോട്ടൺ മിൽസ് വന്നു. പക്ഷേ ഫസ്റ്റ് വേൾഡ് വാർ ആയപ്പോഴാണ് ഇമ്പോർട്ട് ബ്രിട്ടനിൽ നിന്നും കുറഞ്ഞു. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇന്ത്യൻ ഫാക്ടറീസിന് അതൊരു വലിയ നേട്ടമായിരുന്നു കോട്ടൺ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം. നെക്സ്റ്റ് വി സ്റ്റഡീഡ് അബൌട്ട് the sword of Tipu Sultan and Wood's steel. Here is a picture of Tipu's sword made in the late 18th century. Here is a picture. It is written with a gold on steel handle of Tipu's sword, where other quotations from Korean with a message about the victories in war. Okay. Then we begin the story of Indian steel iron by recounting the famous story of Tipu Sultan, who ruled Mysore till 1799, and he fought 4 wars with the British and died fighting with his sword in his hand. That's a story, but as it is a fact, Tipu's legendary swords were now part of a valuable collections in museum in England. Now it was seen in the museums in England. The sword had an incredibly hard and sharp edge that could easily ride through the opponent's armor. That's it is very made of an incredible hard sharp edge. And this quality, the sword came from the special type of a high carbon steel called woods, which is made from high carbon steel, that is a woods. Wood steel, when made into swords, produced in a very sharp edge with a flowing water pattern. That is why its edge was melted like a flowing water pattern. This pattern came from very small carbon crystals embedded in the iron. Then Francis Buchman, who toured through this Mysore in 1800, and a year after Tipu Sultan's death, had left us an account of the technique by which wood steel was produced in many hundreds of smelting furnaces in Mysore. Then in 1800, this technique, this made of this wood steel, making of this wood steel was found by this Francis Buchman because he toured through this Mysore forest. And a smelting, what is a smelting? The process of obtaining a metal from rock by heating it into a high temperature, that is a smelting. Woods is an anglicized version of Kannada word ukku. In Telugu it is a hukku, and Tamil and Malayalam it is a urik, that is the meaning of a steel. That's about this wood steel. Indian wood steel is fascinated by European scientist Michael Faraday, the legendary scientist and discoverer of electricity and electromagnetism, spent 4 years in studying the properties of Indian steel. Okay, that's about this Indian wood steel. By late in the 19th century, the craft of iron smelting was declined in India, because in most villages, furnaces fell into disuse. The amount of iron produced came down because of the lack of iron. Then, when the colonial government prevented people from entering the reserve forest, how they could get the iron smelters or firewood or charcoal. That's why its production declined. In some areas of the government did grant access in the forest, but the iron smelters had to pay very high tax. So as a result, the smelters did not accept it. As a result, they reduced their income. So this production was also declined. And the steel was being imported from in Britain at that time. Ironsmiths in India began using the imported iron to manufacture utensils and implements. They depend on Britain for making their implements. That's why they this production also declined. In the year 1904, the Charles Weld, an American geologist, and Dorabji Tata, eldest son of Jamshedji Tata, were traveling in Chhattisgarh in search of iron ore deposits. അപ്പോൾ ഇന്ത്യയിൽ അയൺ ഇതിൻ്റെ ഡെപ്പോസിറ്റ്, അതായത് ബ്രിട്ടനിൽ നിന്ന് ഇമ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യാഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ നമുക്കതിൻ്റെ ക്ഷാമം വന്നു. അപ്പോൾ 1904 ചാൾസ് വെൽഡ് traveling through this forest of Chhattisgarh to find about these iron ore deposits. They had spent many months in looking for the source of iron ore to set up a modern iron and steel plant in India. Finally, Jamshedji Tata had decided to spend a large part of his fortune to build a big iron and steel industries in India. So they wanted to find a suitable place for this. One day, after traveling for many hours in the forest, Weld and Dorabji came upon a small village found in the group of men and women carrying baskets loads of iron ore. They spent many times or a lot of days to find iron ore places in Chhattisgarh. Finally, they saw some men and women carrying basket full of iron ore. These people were called Agarias. And when they asked where they had to find this iron ore, they pointed the hill in the distance, where Weld and Dorabji reached the hill after exhausting the dense forest. Then, exploring this hill, the geologist declared that it is a suitable place for this iron and steel factories, because Rajhara Hills are one of the finest ores in the world. They found last late. This region was very dry dry, and water necessary for running the factory was not to be found nearby. But the scarce of water was another problem there. The Tatars had to continue their search for their more suitable place to set up the factory, and the Agarians helped to discover the source of iron ore, and that would later supply by Bhilai steel plant. Ultimately, they find a suitable place, and there they found and built Bhilai steel plant. And a few years later, the areas of the forest were cleared on the banks of the river Subarnarekha and set up a factory and for an industrial township, that is Jamshedpur. And the Tata Iron and Steel Company came into being as a result in 1912. That is shortly we called TISCO, that is Tata Iron and Steel Company. In the late 19th century, India was importing steel was to be manufactured in Britain. Expansion of railways in India had provided a huge market for rails that Britain produced. For a long while, British experts in the Indian railways were unwilling to believe that a good quality of a steel could be produced in India. Firstly, we depend on Britain for the making of this railway, but finally they found that good quality iron in India. By 1914, the First World War broke out. Steel produced in Britain now declined. As a result, they depend on Indian railways depend TISCO for the supplies of rails. After this, 1919, colonial government was buying 90% of the steel manufactured by TISCO. That is the TISCO became the largest or biggest steel industries within the British Empire. That's about TISCO. So you read it well and study it well. Okay.